Yes, we are alive. We give thanks for the moment. We give thanks for life and for the life giver, and we're really grateful for this moment. If y'all know how long I've been attempting to get my brother, I don't want to say nail my brother down because that just sounds so violent. And I don't want to nail, I haven't been attempting to nail my brother down. Just attempting to get my brother in the same place with myself so we can have this very important conversation. It's been a while. So I'm looking forward to what we are destined to share today as a means of continuing our journey. As one of our elders, Nana John Henry Clark, always say, if it's not for the cause of African liberation, and therefore, by extension, human liberation, we should dash it into the trash bin of history. And there have been many people who, through the years, in different, in sometimes with good intentions, they say, well, why is it got to be about African liberation? Well, as I said, in my mind, just speaking for myself, before we get into it and before I introduce our special guest, it's very simple. It's like if you look at a root, if you look at a tree, if you look at the tree of humanity, there is a certain kind of root that is irrefutable. And if the top of the stream is dirty, the whole stream will be dirty. If the root of the tree is not properly nourished, none of the branches can have enough strength to continue. And this is by the Creator's design. This is how it is, So that's one of the things that is very intriguing to me, and I've had to I want to even say come to grips with, but I've had the opportunity to be clear, get clear about over the years. So we have a very special guest. You see him already on the line with us, and we are getting ready to tap in with him. I'm gonna now that you got a preview of his face, like like I was joking with him after like Muhammad Ali is a pretty brother right here. He's a beautiful brother for real, but maybe some of y'all, think he's pretty too, his face, you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? 11 in the morning. So
I agree with that, but
go ahead. But I want to introduce him officially. So I'm gonna take a little short thing to start with some of our theme music, and we're gonna get right into it. Indigenous dreams, the culture we love in. We're talking about Islamic science today. And for those of y'all who saw the invitation, you see some of the nuances that we may have the opportunity to discuss as a means of getting to the crux of the matter. To the crux of the matter. Our brother Imam Ihsan Muhammad is going to be joining us today. So check this out, y'all. I want to share something with you. I want to welcome all of you, and I'm going to share this as part of an opportunity to ask you to like and share the video, share it widely. We're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're recording this for the radio as well, WRFG Atlanta, 89.3 FM. If I could show you where I am, there's a beautiful day in front of us, around us. We're in the midst of a beautiful day. I'm seeing all kind of dandelions in the field. We're at the garden, getting ready to do a whole lot of work today until the earth tilts away from the sun. But I want to just share this with you. And in the meantime, please do share the live and let people know we're live so that we can have an interactive conversation with our beloved brother. Check this out.
To be now, to be now. By far, la ilaha illallah, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba liggéey la ilaha illallah maam dama màggee si sa kër bi ma fa jàng mooy aada ak Islam la ilaha illallah kuy sa Cheikh Alaaji Malick mooy sa Cheikh kuy sa Cheikh Muridu laay baay faal la ilaha illallah Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba liggéey la ilaha illallah maam dama màggee si sa kër li ma fa jàng mooy aada ak l'Islam la ilaha illallah kuy sa Cheikh Alaaji Malick mooy sa Cheikh kuy sa Cheikh Baay Ñas mooy sa Cheikh Muridu Laay Tijaan yaa ngi Laay yaa ngi Ñaseen
Anybody want to join it? Here's your here's a mosque. Yeah. Make no fuss about it. A few accepted, a few didn't. And then he tell me either go to accept the faith or go to pick up your sword because I'm gonna fight you. You know. Now, Bilal accompanies the prophet on his various missions. And he is looking for someone to call the faithful to prayer. Bilal becomes the first of the Muslim to call the faithful to prayer. And he has looked, and he didn't, among the men of people of Arabia, he don't want to use bells or, you know. Then he comes home one evening. Bilal is his steward and his mace carrier and general all-around man. And he tells Bilal his problems. Then he asks Bilal to see if he can say the call to prayer. And he said, why have I been looking all over Arabia when you have the sweetest voice in all the land? Now Bilal becomes the one to call the faithful to prayer. And he makes out of it a great art form. And even today, If you go to Senegal and listen when the faithful are being called to prayer, the Africans do it, and it is a concert. It is a concert piece. Then go to an Arab country and listen, almost like a bad bird singing off tone. They can't bring it off to this day. They can't bring off that song. The beauty of that song. There's no God but Allah. Allah is, you know, it's repetitious, but it's the African who can take that repetition and infuse a spiritual beauty into it that you will not find in any other country, any other place in the world. Because in Libya, they just record an African voice and play it on record from the place that they get it that way.
Yes, we give thanks for the moment. Just a little tune up with someone who has had such a significant role in the mental liberation journey of African people in the past, in the 20th century, Dr. John Henrik Clarke, someone who's often been very controversial, even, you know, in many ways, even about the subject that we're going to share today. And we want to start with him, as well as the brother Youssou N'Dour. And I will tell you a personal story about that song. And even the title, the song is a title track for a film called I Bring What I Love, a very powerful, transformative song, which had a deep impact on me. You know, they say when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. But we're going to get into that, but I don't want to waste any more time introducing our very special guest. He's taken the time to be with us off of his very busy schedule. I'm serious. I'm not even joking right now. You know, as I was saying in jest, I've been waiting to get him for a long time. However, it's in jest, but also in reality. You know, we talk off the mic a lot, and we've been looking forward to getting this reasoning live. So here we are right now. Our brother Imam Ihsan Muhammad. He's the resident of Imam of Masjid Siddiq wa Ikhlas. I could say so much about this brother. He's been on our program before, for those of y'all loyal listeners to the Global Drumbeat, the Ancestral Rock. One thing I really appreciate about him, a few things, they're all in one. His seriousness, his sincerity is even a better word, his sincerity about the way that he lives, you know, and being a model of that way. That's one thing in particular, and that's a gift in itself, you know. Also, you know, his humility in general, you know, as a brother, you know what I mean? A brother who definitely, I can tell you, has recognized great powers in this world. And one of the signs of someone who is truly powerful is their humility, you know. Also, he got jokes. He got jokes. He'll have you rub me your belly with pleasure, you know what I mean? Because he's, you know, and that's another part of it. This is a soul brother, a son of the soil. He's a husband, a father, and we're grateful to have him with us today. Imam, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you for taking the time to be with us, brother, man.
Alhamdulillah. It's our pleasure. Alhamdulillah.
It's true. Right, Ramadan Mubarak too, as well.
Alhamdulillah. It's been a little bit to get together. Pushing me being busy, but that's you. I can't never tell whether you stateside or you somewhere on the other side of the pond. Or, you know.
That's, man, it is what it is. You know, it is what it is. But we here now. We here now. You know, there's so much to talk about, and I just want to, you know, follow the tuggings of the spirit, as they say. You know, you say the Holy Spirit. You know what I mean? Because as we're sharing in the introduction, on one level, first and foremost, for me, the reason it's important to have this conversation, this series that we're doing, is because liberation is important. Human liberation. There's an African proverb that say, if your only tool is a hammer, you look at every problem like a nail. So, as passionate I am about agriculture, for instance, as you well know, we share deep roots as that is concerned. Maybe we can get into some of that. It's very similar in terms of the spiritual life, the cultivation of our spirit, because I am very clear that is a huge part of our humanity, and to that extent, of course, there are many different spiritual journeys. There are many different spiritual paths that humanity has been introduced to, that humanity is cleaved to. So with all that backdrop, now here we are in the year 2025, according to somebody's clock, the Gregorian calendar. And, Martin Luther King would say, God has a way of baffling the wise and the prudent. Our Creator has a way of getting our attention, to keep us focused on the original plan, which is, again, cultivation of ourself, our optimal cultivation of ourselves for our liberation, for our prosperity, if you will, So sometimes that comes through the rise of a dictator. Sometimes that comes through suppression. Sometimes that comes through a global pandemic, whatever it is to get the people's attention. At least that's how I look at it. So here we are again, and we are looking, the world is looking to return to its source of strength, its source of power as humanity, so that we can navigate these times. Oftentimes, one of my brothers said one time, and I don't know how you see this, maybe I'm going to ask you to chime in on this or to weigh in on it. Hard times create strong people, and strong people create easy times, and easy times create weak people. We got this cycle.
Yeah.
Is it that simple?
There's a tradition related from in Islam to that effect that if you look at any culture, you will see a shift every 3 generations. But it's tied to this saying that you quoted because, like you said, those hard times, they create a certain caliber of people. And then that caliber of people, they come and make things, they create and they grow and they build so that things become easier for the next generation. And then the generation following them, that ease, sometimes it does create a weaker type of person. And that weak person creates, the problems that then the cycle have to start over. If God intends for that culture and those people to continue on and subsist. And if it's not in his intention for them to subsist, then you won't see that generation, after that 3rd generation, you won't see it flip or regenerate. It'll just die out and those people get lost.
That's real. So there seems to be a substantiated, deeply substantiated philosophy. And with that in mind, here we are. So as I was saying in the introduction, in my mind, especially from my lens, I'm a 2nd generation or maybe 3rd generation Pan-Africanist, very deeply interested for obvious reasons in the liberation of African people and by extent all humanity. And so many times, as the soldiers are grappling with the tools that they have, spirituality has come up, and in some circles, spirituality and religion are distinguished. There's a distinction made between spirituality and religion. Sometimes that's just semantic. Sometimes it's really deep distinction made. And then, in the political revolutionary traditions of the 20th century, a lot of that rose up in Africa and in the Caribbean and even in other parts of the world came through Marxism. You know, it came through a Marxist kind of energy, and the Marxist.
To insert before it slipped my mind, it's like when you mention those things as separate, you know, the religion, the spirituality, and even the political leaning of a person. I want to point out that there's something that was never separated of old. These are things, or concepts that were always just organically together for the human being. It was only when we get to the introduction or the spread of I would say the Roman / Western European like groupthink of separating the religion from everything else,
like church and state.
Church and state. This is and we'll call it what it is by the fruit of it. The fruit of it has not been good, and the result of it has not been good for us as a people. And it's something that pervades our thinking to this day. Even Muslims, you can catch some of us sometime where this idea of separation of church and state, or spirituality and religion, has infected or otherwise corrupted our own thinking. And it's something that we have to be aware of to even be able to get out. But, you know, I just wanted to slip that in before we forget, because this whole idea of not even the religious and the political, I mean, religious and spiritual, but the political as well, these things are not separate. They were never separate for us as a people if we look back historically in terms of the different cultures and peoples of Africa. It was only when we got tainted with this type of Western European thinking that now these things are separate, and the human being is worse off as an entity for that.
Yeah, I feel you. I feel you completely. And honestly, that's where we want to go, by means of you sharing some of your story, by means of you sharing some of the experiences that you feel inspired to share, by means of I was inspired to use a picture, artistic rendering of Sheikh Amadou Bamba as an example, as well as a book which I must say I have not read yet, but I've been told much about this book, and I wanted to give much respect to our recently departed from the flesh. He returned to the source, Baba Bilal Sunni Ali, Sheikh Baba Bilal Sunni Ali, who I was visiting one day, and he had this book on his shelf. But it's a book called Ways of Knowing, which is just kind of an academic, a scholarly comparison, deep dive into the Sufism of and Ifa, Sufism and Ifa, as the book states, two West African intellectual traditions. What I'm saying all that to say, you know, that's where really I want to go. So I appreciate you inserting that, because that's really where we want to go. So to get there, as I was just kind of setting that up, I want to just address the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is that the perception that just like Christianity, it's interesting you mentioned the Roman groupthink, but you didn't say anything about the Arab, the Aryan Arab kind of thing. But there's a perception that just like Christianity, Islam is, for lack of a better word, a slave religion. You know, it's something that was introduced to the people of the world under the sword. And if it wasn't with the sword, people wouldn't be Muslim, especially in Africa. So I want to start there. I want to start with asking you to really address that, so that we can really get to the sweet spot.
Alhamdulillah. So it was. I don't know. You know what. What brought what it came. How it came to you to even introduce the program with those two things. That, you know, introduction from our brother Yusuf Ndur. They say Yusuf Ndur, but his name is Yusuf. And his song, right? And also the clip.
Sorry, no, that's my phone. I ain't put it on.
No problem.
I didn't follow my own protocol. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, so it was perfect that you know, how it fell to your heart to introduce the show with the clip from Yusuf Ndur and from our elder, the scholar, Dr. Clark. So just we'll bounce off Dr. Clark.
Yes.
As you mentioned, you know, he has some controversial opinions about the Islam. And what I say to that is, you know, with all my love and respect for him, because I've been a reader of his output for some time, and I've benefited from Dr. Clark's from his historical output, and not but, because I don't want to negate that. I want to say that some of what has informed his opinion has been the scholarship of Orientalists who their stated goal was to separate, again, not church from state, but the African from Islam, right? Because part of making sure that the African in America brought here under duress and in chains, part of making sure that they stayed a slave was making sure that they separated them from their Islam. And this is something that it fly over people's head all the time. The lengths and the effort and the money and the energy that they invested in making sure that not only that they divested the slave from their ability to read that they already had when they came here, their knowledge of the Quran, their knowledge of Islam and fiqh and of history and of science and whatever they had and brought here, they made sure that they prevented that from being taught. They prevented that from being passed down. They prevented the people from praying. They prevented them from spreading their religion. They prevented them from all that. Why? Because they knew that Islam was such that they would not be able to keep that man and that woman a slave if the religion is with them. If that religion was passed to their children, they knew that that would be a means of their emancipating themselves from slavery in the following generation, before the generation even finished, they would be out of slavery. They knew that the key to making sure that they convert this African into a complete slave was to make sure that they were separated from their Islam. And that is a sign for itself for anybody who want to reflect. So with Dr. Clark, as with many of the Orientalists, they would like to conflate many things. The problem is they don't want to recognize that these people, they have a stated interest in maintaining this type of thinking and this type of philosophy that they've created.
And, you know, I must say that one of the things that I appreciate about Dr. Clark is and I'm going to play a little bit more of that lecture, and I think you would see what I'm saying, because I've often heard about his criticism of whether the church or Islam or all this. I've seen him as more of a balanced scholar, where he also makes a distinction himself, you know, in terms of the Arab culture and what happened in Africa. And you know, like, for instance, Chancellor Williams, who was a great scholar in himself, big up our brother Akil. Why am I forgetting Akil's last name right now? From the Jurassic 5.
I just got a chance to see him yesterday when they were making the janazah prayer in absentia for Amir Khalil, one of the brothers in the community. I'm sure you know him.
Yeah.
So I see him there yesterday.
Akil Talib. But he shares something every year about how Sheikh Anta Diop was able to clarify some of what Chancellor Williams didn't get completely right, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And these are all African warrior scholars who we have great respect for in terms of what their overall accomplishment of waking up our minds, you know.
Sure.
So it's a thing. So I really appreciate what you're saying, and I wanna share a little bit more of what Dr. Clark was saying, because what I appreciate about him is that he has enough sense about humanity, our humanity. While he may have his personal opinion about something, to also give a balanced view, to say, well, you know, I'm not telling you to leave this thing. I'm just telling you to know what the root of it is, you know, and to study it. So ironically, people like Dr. Clark and his scholarship led me to Islam. I'm saying, ironically.
That's why I said I wouldn't detract anything from him. I would only add something to it. You know what I'm saying? Because me too, I've benefited from his output a lot. You know, so alhamdulillah for everything that he was blessed to put out. And again, I know that some of what people have found controversial in his opinion about Islam has been informed through this kind of Orientalist history that's available, you know, to us. And that's okay, because he didn't try to tell you that he was a religious scholar. He didn't put himself off as that. He never laid claims to that. So I never found any of that particularly offensive to me or even controversial, because I wasn't laying on him something that he wasn't claiming. Exactly. I was taking from him what was beneficial and what he said, this is what I'm about. So I took that from him and I benefited. You know what I'm saying? When I'm looking for other things, I'm go to the people of those things. But anyway,
and that's a serious point you just made in terms of a formula. You just shared a formula that you use of discernment, right? And in a world where it's difficult to know what you're getting, you know, in the world where you're walking through a lot of various stimuli, over a super stimulated world, it's important. So it's very important to have this type of way within ourselves to discern.
And it's important. This will probably come up later, but it's important for a person to have a guide, a teacher, because the person himself who is a student of knowledge or seeking guidance, the first step is to acknowledge, I don't know. And in the sea of, we don't even say knowledge, in this sea of information where I have a device that's a little bigger than my hand, a little smaller than my head. Some people may, you know, disagree with that, but I have all this information on it suddenly. Information is almost boundless. It coincides with a time where people are the most ignorant. How does that happen?
How does that work?
We need somebody to hold our hand through the field of information to gain knowledge that's beneficial. If anybody just dive into the information and they just come out with what they get, I mean, you know, this is the result that we see, and it's not just religious; it's across the board.
Across the board.
People medicate themselves after looking at a few websites or YouTubes, and they kill themselves, you know, or they get sick and get sent to the hospital, just as an example. But so alhamdulillah. Going back to our elder, of course, I only mentioned what people find controversial, because those who are aware of him or know him, you know, we know of all the benefit. The controversy is maybe 2%, and the 98% of it is all beneficial. So we didn't mention that, you know. I assume that whoever know of him will know that.
But your point is well taken. Just to reiterate for those of y'all who just joined in, the reason we're Imam Ihsan Muhammad. I was going to say Baba Ihsan, and he's that too. He's a father, definitely. Not just in the sense of a physical, you know, a progenitor, but also Baba. The word means to cover, you know, and he's the person who covers his community in the way that he's gifted. So it was like what you were saying in essence is that a lot of the scholarship which was made available to some of our African warrior scholars came from Orientalists who had a very specific mission, a very specific mission goal to remove people away from a source of their power. That was a very clear point you made.
Yeah.
So please continue with that.
I saw a brother of ours shared a video from, the brother that they call him the White Malcolm X. I believe his name is Brother Shaheed Bolson.
Okay, I never heard of it.
Never?
No.
I'm gonna send you a link to his. He got a YouTube. They call him the White Malcolm X. He was saying, he was talking about America more so, white America. He said, everything that you've done was intentional. You didn't trip up and kidnap people and bring them to this country to enslave them. It wasn't by mistake. It was very intentional. And he said, the intentionality of it, we can just take an example. You took your scriptures from your religion and you interpreted them purposely in a way to justify religiously and for us spiritually the enslavement of a certain group of people based on their color and their allegedly being allegedly being descended from a certain ancestor, a son of Prophet Noah, alayhi salam. You took all of this effort at such a high level in your culture. That means from the head of your religion all the way on down, everybody is complicit in that, in the effort that we're in to psychologically and philosophically create something to keep these people in the state of slavery and all the states that stem from that that we see in the society today. So he was just pointing out the intentionality of that. So I link that together with all of their scholarly output is tainted. And if you go into it and you don't understand that, you can be misled or otherwise have your thinking or your heart or your spirit perverted by reading them. And you can be perverted that way by touching anybody else's scholarship that inherit or take from it. Right. So again, without a teacher, even when it comes to the study of Pan-Africanism, without a teacher, without a guide, the person can be perverted and be on a slightly wrong path when it comes to their thinking.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many great points you've raised. One of them that I was thinking of is that, from another perspective, looking at it from the inverse, from the eyes of the beholder then, right? I feel that a lot of the analysis in this modern time is lazy analysis, like void of deep research, void of any critical thinking.
Armchair analysis.
And the reason why I say that, even on a basic level, is we have this kind of perception that anything that is good, it wouldn't be ever, it's impossible for it to be associated with anything that's bad. So if Islam is good, if Christianity, if anything, anything, Ifa, anything, any spiritual way, if we're just talking about spirituality right now, is good, then why would people be allowed to commit atrocities in that name? And to me, that's just simplistic thinking, because like people having wars over water right now. Water ain't did nothing to nobody, Water, no one making the area. The Yoruba proverb, no one makes enmity with water, right? However, this is just the reality, So it's just something else that is often interesting to me, because all of this conversation, of course, is geared towards nurturing a reawakened mind, which includes a critically thinking mind, which includes deep analysis, and not just, as you said, armchair analysis, armchair thought or philosophy.
And for the person who is either has some taste of classical study. When I say classical or traditional study means, yes, you can't just sit in your chair and look on the internet. You have to get up and go to the library. You have to read books. You have to go and sit in front at the foot of a teacher, a professor. You have to go seek them out and get knowledge. For people who have a taste of, it's just a taste of or heard of traditional knowledge seeking, then that person will want to ask the question, okay, and we'll go ahead and put a name on the elephant that's in the middle of the room. The name is, or the elephant is in the middle of the room, is the idea that, Islam is a slave religion, which to me as a child, I found that ridiculously preposterous, but I didn't have the words to express at the time. But I just, if a child, the simplest thing I could say was like, what? Islam or Muslims didn't bring me to this country.
Right.
The Muslims didn't bring me here. That would be my child response. Right. Of course, as we grew older and we had a chance to study and travel and learn, then we know it's even deeper than that. So let's address it. So for the student of knowledge and history, when the topic of slavery comes into question, we have to go back. We can't let somebody define terminology or define points of history where we just accept and we'll pick up here and go forward. Like, no. What happened before that? What happened before that? If the people, they want you to basically suspend your intellect and your scientific thinking when it comes to them and when it comes to their versions of history that they want you to accept. But we don't accept that. So we as students of history, we want to look back as far as we can. Slavery, unfortunately, has been a blight on humankind from the beginning, from as far back as we can look into the histories of human beings. Originally, slavery was a product of war and nothing else. The original slavery was a product of war. And not just war, because we tend to lump everything under war. But technically, when a peoples are attacked without any justification or provocation, that's not really a war. That's more of an extermination.
Right, a genocide.
Yeah, genocide. And we see this to wit, just a small note, I don't want to get lost over there, but just with situations like in Sudan and in Gaza, they call it a war. This is very misleading. People say to me, oh, it's not, here comes the sound with the semantics. But the word...
Semantics are important in times.
And they know, but the common person would like to brush it off like it's nothing, not knowing the whole time they're the ones being hoodwinked and bamboozled with language. So to call what's going on in Gaza a war, immediately when you hear war, you hear two factions who are equally paired, who are at odds with each other and have resorted to physical confrontation and violence to solve whatever that is. This is not what that is. So not only war, but, physical provocation, military provocation, we'll say that. Slavery was always the result of that in the beginning. It was only when it came to our peculiar experience, as they say, where slavery was boiled down into a philosophy based on scripture, where a certain person, because of their color and their race, they were meant to be slaves. That's something new. That's an invention of the Europeans. Before that time, slavery was a product of military aggression, where the loser, their people will be captured and either held for ransom or kept as slaves. Because in those days, you didn't have the you didn't have this capitalist ideology, you know, where you have companies, corporations, and employees, and so on and so forth. You had kingdoms, you had monarchies, and when they got to the point where they tapped out on the resources of their own people, when it came to labor, they would look outward for other sources of labor. And what were those sources of labor? Weaker peoples and tribes and nations that they could go and militarily absorb and then use those people as new sources of labor to build their, you know, to increase and build their kingdom and so on and so forth. We know, the students of history and knowledge, that everybody was being enslaved across the board, whether it was, you know, the Eastern Europeans. The word Slav that denotes a certain group, a family or tribal group of Eastern Europeans, the Slavs. The word means slave. They were being enslaved to the point where their tribe became known as slaves. Mm-hmm. You understand? All of that just to say, because I don't want to get on the bus and go all the way across town and then forget what we're talking about. All that to say that slavery as an institution predated Islam by far. Sure. Right? Now, come forward. Let's just take Arabia as an example. And we know that the cultures of the world that were extant at that time were either more so or less so. Arabia was no stranger to slavery. The Persian Empire was no stranger to slavery. Neither was the Roman Empire, which all were extant at the time. These were the superpowers of the day. Mm-hmm. And this is before Islam had anything to do with it. And again, this is at a point in the world where there was no rationalization or somebody sit somewhere and trying to rationalize that these people should be slaves because of the color of their skin or where they come from or their tribe. If they thought, if a kingdom or a tribe thought you were weak and they thought that they could come and get you for resources, then that's what it was. Mm-hmm. Class. It's just that simple. Once you study that and you understand that, now you know that, okay, so this has been around before Islam. Right? But a person can say, yeah, but that doesn't really say that Islam is not, a religion of slavery. Okay, let's say that, that's a postulation of someone that someone has. We respond to you and say what the Prophet ﷺ said. He said, Islam came to free everybody. And one of the key tenets of that is that Islam equalized everybody. Whether you rich, whether you poor, it equalized everybody. And it came and it brought a system of justice to where it protected the weak in the society, that being the children the women, and even the men whose tribe was not strong. It protected them. Whereas other societies and the society of Arabia before Islam came and got strong, what was the rule? The strong ruled the weak. There was no police force that protected the weak in the society. In none of these societies, none of them. When Islam came, one of the biggest gripes of the Quraysh, and the Quraysh was the tribe, the ruling tribe or junta of the day in Mecca, which was the epicenter of Arabia at the time. So we're talking about the epicenter and the tribe that ruled the epicenter. And because they ruled the epicenter of Arabia, Mecca, they also had influence that spread far outside of Arabia because as people tend to forget, the Kaaba was not only a pilgrimage place for Muslims later on, before Islam, a pilgrimage place for people who were idolaters, for Jewish people, and for the Christians. And the Kaaba is mentioned, and Mecca is mentioned in the Bible. So before Islam came, all three of these groups would come to make pilgrimage to Mecca. And this is why Mecca became strong and a place of influence. It made the Quraysh this big tribe with power and influence and so on and so forth. One of their biggest gripes, they said, when the prophet used to preach to them about Islam, they said, you want us to be equal with our slaves? You want us to be equal with the people who are barely free, our employees? You want us to eat the same food they eat? You want us to house them the same way we house ourselves? What kind of crazy idea is this? So you want to basically make us equal with them. That was one of their biggest gripes. And it's a sign to remind people that Islam, again, came to free people. They said, you want us to give up all of the tithes and the offerings that people bring to these idols. You want to release them from the slavery of the spirit, where they got 360 idols that they're supposed to worship and offer rites to and offer and make offerings to. You want to overnight destroy all those 360 idols. You free these people from the obligations of bringing these tithes and offerings and spending their wealth into nothing, because all they do is when the people turn around and go back to their lands from making the pilgrimage, the Quraysh, they come and collect all those offerings for themselves. You said you want to release the people from all of that and set them free and have them just worship one God? What about us? What about all the gold and the diamonds and the silver and everything that gets brought here as offerings? You know, we're going to lose that? And these people, you're going to set them free from that? No, we can't accept that, right? Again, this idea of Islam being a freedom for them. So this is why the ruling power of the day sought to suppress and fight Islam, even to the point where they attempted several times to assassinate the Prophet ﷺ, to destroy or kill or cut short the message. They didn't even want people, they used to tell people to cover their ears when the Prophet ﷺ would recite the Quran and preach, because they said, we don't want our weak people among us and the slaves to be corrupted, to have their thinking corrupted, to think that they can be free, that they can be equal to us, that they should have rights. Huh? We're not with all of that. So that's going to disrupt our society, where we are at the pinnacle of it and we enjoy all of the entitlement that we get, and we're not trying to let that go. You hear in some connections, I know, to the ruling party of the day.
Right. It's an old formula that history can reveal to us if we take a dip
And if we don't take it,
that has been recurring, and a recurring formula.
and when we don't take
That seems to be obviously an effective formula as well. You know what I mean?
It has to. If we don't take the dip, then what do they say? If you don't learn the history and learn from it, then you're bound to suffer the same consequences again.
Yeah, you're bound to repeat it. And then, ironically, that is some of what is raised as a question when looking at these religions that came into Africa that didn't, in some ways, they would say it didn't originate in Africa, even though that in itself is something that is controversial and that is debated amongst scholars. We're talking about.
We're gonna get into all of that if we got time.
We definitely got time. Imam Ihsan Muhammad is with us, and the name of this program, the name of this series for those of y'all who've been tapping in, is Indigenous Dreams: The Culture You Love In. And in order for us to get to this culture that we're sharing about today, we're taking the time to kind of clarify a few things that may or may not be controversial, but definitely to address many of the elephants in the room, as Brother Ihsan mentioned. I think I also used that term. I know I did, so that we can get to the science of the matter. We can get to the crux of the matter. I'm going to do something now. I'm going to play a little bit more of this lecture from the esteemed scholar, our Nana, John Henry Clarke, and take a very short break and asking y'all to like and share the video. Like and share the video, and let us know that you're with us by sharing the link with someone else so that they can also be hip to the scene. And let us know if you love the sound of what we're throwing down. Check it out.
But Libya seemed to have been the only predominantly Arab country where the 5 prayers are called on time, and where you do see a degree of people moving toward the mosque to say the 5 prayers. In most Arab countries, the traffic keeps on and nobody pays slight attention to it. But in Senegal, a predominantly African country, when it comes time to say one of the 5 prayers, the traffic stops. And you could be going to have a baby, but the traffic stops. And my point is that whether I believe in it or not, it's just so beautiful to see so many black people doing something in unison. Right or wrong is of no significance. No significance. Just see them doing something together. It's a thing of joy. You notice one thing generally, the men and the women are closer together in African countries than in Arab countries. And inasmuch as the prophet's first public act at a time when, because they are a desert people, when a woman had 2 girls, if the 3rd child was a girl, they either got rid of her or put her to death. Women protested this. He defended their right to keep the children. Now, inasmuch as the prophet defended their right to keep their children, one wonders why and how over the years systematically Islam became predominantly a male chauvinistic religion. Here you have to separate Islam from Arabism. Maybe it was something about the desert, and maybe it was the belief that a woman needed protection. But very few women rose to high position in the Arab side of the religion. And I can name one woman head of state in the black side of it who not only headed a state, but rode in the head of her army and commanded her armies in the field. 1500s, that's Elmina of Nigeria in the state of Zara. I recently recommended that she be included among Budweiser's great queens of Africa. And I purposely supervised the writing of the copy in order to eliminate a whole lot of the misconceptions about her. And they are misconceptions and rumors. The rumor was, because she never married, is that she took a new lover each night, and if his performance wasn't adequate, she had him killed in the morning. There was no proof of this at all. And if that rumor got out, I guess half of the male population in the world might disappear. Even stars don't perform at their best every night. So that was an important thing anyway. The important thing was this strong woman defended northern, it wasn't Nigeria then, it was in the Hausa country. The state of Zara defended her state and built walls of defense that still can be seen in this part of Nigeria. Defended her right as a woman without getting into the nonsense about liberation. Held her ground, defended her lineage, and left her mark on that territory of Africa until that part, as a part of Nigeria that is literally called Elmina City. And she was a Muslim. And that did not happen any other place among Muslims for women. That did not happen. It surely did not happen any place among the Arabs. And the revolutionary African, especially revolutionary against colonialism, happened nearly always on that side, on the African side. That meant that the African accepted the religious side and the spirituality, and that Islam said something to the African that it did not say to the Arab, and that it still says something to the African that it is not saying to the Arab. That if Islam is to be rescued and made the great spiritual and moral religion it was intended to be, instead of the political instrument for opportunists, it will be the African who will make it so. He has the capacity to make it so. And this is what we need to look at, not to ignore the Arab at all, not to ignore the fact that it was from Arabia that the religion came out, swept over into North Africa, and had its rapid growth. All right, now.
You see, again, anything that anybody ever found so-called controversial, it could be maybe 2%, and the rest of it is so beneficial for our people.
Yeah. I mean that's to me is the mark of into integrity or scholastic integrity, you know.
Even
To be able to look at things in a balanced way and to point out the good as well as the troublesome, and to give, you know, because as they say, a good teacher, you know, I love Proverbs. One proverb says, a good teacher does not teach you what to see, but points you in the right direction.
He said so much in that short clip, man. Like, if I was to take that clip from the show, I could work out workshops. Mm-hmm. I could work out a month full of workshops because he touched on too many things. That's why I was just like, oh, stop! I can't even keep up. Like, he hitting too hard. It's too many. I mean, I don't even know. I'm reeling a little bit, and I don't even know where to. I'm trying to keep my footing, cause like you know, when it comes to knowledge.
Yeah. It's a beautiful rabbit hole or an ocean to jump in. Well, let me. I'll do in the context. He was this whole lecture. I think I forget the name. The Rise of Islam in Africa, but he was really delivering a scathing analysis of Ali Mazrui, kind of thing that he did, you know, as an Arab and everything. That was the context of that lecture in particular. It's available on YouTube. But you know, for me, that says a lot right there. It talks really more than anything else because Dr. Clarke, his work speaks for itself, you know, in many ways, in so many ways. Of course, every generation has the opportunity, and I would even argue the what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, the obligation, for lack of a better word, to assess those who have come before us, and so we can refine the technology, the scholarship, the method, anything. You know what I mean? That's just part of it. So there's that. You know, I'm just saying though. What I want to get to is some of what he was hinting to, and I'm using him as an example because he is one who's known to have a hardcore stance, you know, about anything, any nuances in any way, you know, that seem to be stumbling blocks towards our liberation.
So I want to mention I just want to touch on one of the things he talked about. The difference between like the status of women, right, in Arabia and in Africa, because it's something that I saw and I remember it hit me as a child when I first got to Senegal, right? So he mentioned, you know, that he said, well, he asked the rhetorical question, how did Islam get to be a male chauvinist religion, right? After having been around so many different people and traveled a little bit.
And especially after the Prophet, peace be upon him, having been so firm in his stance of women liberation. Like my father, for instance, Baba Yussi, he's not a Muslim. He's been around Muslims a lot of times in his life, you know, a deep part of his life. He's 99 years young right now. He would always tell me, Prophet Muhammad is one of the world's first women liberators.
Yes, for sure.
This is just what he says, just as a person, as a student of history, with no kind of bias, you know, in terms of a religious bias.
Exactly. So let's highlight that. The difference is in the culture of the peoples who are taking Islam as their religion and their spiritual path. Africa is no monolith, and you know this better than me, right? Africa is the biggest continent. Africa is huge.
True.
Africa, just on the western part of Africa, there are over 100 different languages being spoken. And as many as different tribal, and when we say different languages, they're not just like potato. These are different languages altogether. Only under the Akan family of languages, I think they have 400 different dialects. So there are no monolith in any way, whether cultural, language, food, dress. They're very different peoples. And each of them, they have their different culture. But what we can say, and I can only speak in this vein for Western Africa, is that when it comes to women in the culture, what I saw myself when I came, I'm giving you the eyewitness of a 13-year-old child, because when I go to my mind, I see myself that young, narrating it back to myself. I said, this is different. In America, we came up around a lot of the Indo-Pak brothers and sisters. So even as a child, I noted that culturally we were made to be very separate, to the point where brothers and their male children that I grew up with, they may have been from Pakistan and from other places, other South Asian countries. I don't know their mothers. If I saw their mothers in the street, I wouldn't know them from Eve, from Hawaii.
Right.
If I saw their sisters in school somewhere, I wouldn't know them from Becky, because of that separation. But that separation was entirely cultural. And we did not know that before I left here and went to Africa. I didn't know that. I thought that was a part of Islam, but I was a child. So I give my child self an excuse. I'm excusing them for that. When I got to Africa, I made a note of that. I said, hey, the men and the women, they kind of like mixed up here. Like, what's happening? Like, but nobody tripping though. Ain't nobody staring down the women. Ain't nobody being, inappropriate. Everybody just kind of going about their way. And it was a shock, not only to myself, but to many of us. And we talked about it amongst ourselves, like, yo, this is wild, But we soon got used to it, and that became our new norm. That it didn't trip us out, and we got real natural with that. Very, very quick, because it was easy to us, because it was something that was ingrained in us culturally, but deep down inside, unconsciously. So when we were disabused of this other cultural stuff that had kind of tainted us, in Islam, being here with our other brothers, and it wasn't like they tainted us, consciously. It was unconscious on their part too. They didn't know they was doing this, because it's not something that people like really talked about, even thought about. But I recognized that there, and I recognized that I changed after a time. And every now and then we get somebody who come and be like, yo, and we laugh at them because we know what they were going through. They were like, man, like, what's happening? Like, I don't know what's happening. Like, why are we mixed up like this? What's happening? I thought we were supposed to be so separate here and there. And, mashallah. So another thing that I noticed is that in Senegal, and we're talking specifically about, Wolof culture, is that the men, they have their culture, or they have their stuff, and women, they have their stuff. And it's like, I didn't see that before, but both sides are open, and they're not locked or blocked off. So it was like, I would see, like things that were basically for women, and they be having a good time partying and doing this and this and that. And Americans, we at the time we didn't know no better, so we'd be like, hey, where those drums coming from? We follow the drums to the sound and like go in the house. Now, because we were kids, nobody would say nothing to us. We walk in and watch the drumming and watch the dancing, the women dancing, and the dancing they would be doing they would be kind of wild a little bit, but it was because that was their thing. That was their space. They were in their space. There wasn't supposed to be no men there, but they didn't see us as men to be like, hey, what you doing? Get out of here. You know what I'm saying? If a man walked in there, be like, hey, get out of here. What are you doing in here? They would boot them out. You know what I'm saying? So it's like they had everybody had their arena, right? But at the same time, there wasn't this like cultural imperative to keep the sexes so separate, which I always felt was artificial. And artificial,
and maybe even to your point, And to our point, to our getting closer to our goal in terms of getting into the essence of a thing, because we still are kind of in the periphery, of you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just saying though,
we gotta dance on the edge of the circle, and then we make our way to the middle. You know, you don't just start in the middle. You gotta dance your way into the middle.
And that's what makes you appreciate the middle even more. You know what I mean? Yeah, you know what I'm saying? But like that, for real though, you know, it's just like it's a the culture is so important. Culture is so nuanced and also important in understanding things, because it's the lens through which we see life, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, as you mentioned, just even as, I mean, I appreciate what you just shared in terms, even as a 13-year-old young man coming from here, because there's so much that we've inherited. I often quote Dr. Khalid Muhammad, great soldier, you know, who is now an ancestor. He, you know, on that classic Public Enemy album, what's it called? Nation of Millions, taking Nation of Millions and hold us back. You know, have you forgotten that when we were brought here, we were robbed of our language, robbed of our culture, our religion, our God? You know, and I'd be asking myself, okay, well, what is that exactly? Was it just we was robbed of some black image of God or something, or we was robbed of some, you know, and it was placed with Michelangelo's cousin, or, you know, or Christ, you know what I mean? You know, or even the black image of Christ, you know. So was that what we was robbed of? When we went, but he said so much, we lost our religion, our culture, our ways, our moral ways, our folk ways, our God, our sense of God, all of this. And I just asked myself, again, crawling out of it in the inverse, well, what does that look like? What are those things? And a few of those things are even how we've been taught to relate to our women.
Yeah, big time.
Even how, you know, that's just one of the natural things, you know, that seems to be, if I'm going to be an oppressor, if I'm going to be someone who is attempting to conquer people, I'm going to attempt to first cut you off from your natural sources of power. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Ultimately, that's from your understanding of the Creator, and then also of creation. So, like, go ahead.
Dr. Clark said that we want to touch on, because we don't want to forget. You know, I don't want to forget some of the things he mentioned. Another thing that he talked on, he wanted to illustrate to you the difference in the way that the culture is seeing the women. We know that, and to wit, this time period among the Arabs is called al-Jahiliyyah, or the period or the era of ignorance. This is known by them by that name. One of the big facets of the period of ignorance, or Jahiliyyah, was that they looked, and Allah talk about this in the Quran in more than one place, they would look at the birth of a girl child as a shame, as a blight. And if they brought, Allah said, when they bring the news to you of a girl child born, suddenly your face darkens in shame. Right? And he mentioned, you know, Dr. Clark mentioned this to illustrate the way that their culture look at women in their society. And it's like, just take Islam over here. Take whatever a religion, just take a look at it from a human standpoint as a species. If we got cat, we got dog, human being, giraffe. Let's back up before giraffe, human being. Guess what? It takes a woman to propagate your species. How did you get to the point in your culture where the society looked at a woman, or the birth of a woman, as in such a way? I don't even know how to. I know how to describe it, but I don't want to get lost in that hole either. How did your society get to the point where you began to look at women in this way, right? But that's how it was, to the point where one of the Sahabas said he used to sit down and cry when he thought of the daughters that he buried alive, and he would ask God to forgive him. One of them he took it upon himself. He basically turned his home into an orphanage where if he heard of a family, and this was before Islam, if he heard of a family that gave birth to a woman or a girl child, he would rush to them. And if he found them to be the type of family that would bury their child alive, he would say, give them to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then he would go and raise that girl child until she was a young lady. And then he would bring them back to the family and say, here she is now, a young woman. If you want, you can demand her to be taken back into your household. Otherwise, I'm going to see that she gets married off into a good family.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So even in the period of ignorance, there was some elements that recognized that it was beyond a blasphemy.
Right.
At the species level.
Yeah, that's just straight stupidity. Even if you just looking at it like business, like a transaction, and you don't even truly have the heart for the humanity of women, how in the world are you even going to how are you going to maintain yourself?
How you gonna stay alive? How you gonna subsist as a species?
Right.
You understand? So, but this, what he mentioned, it gives you an idea of the color of the feeling that their society at that time had towards women.
Mm-hmm.
We're all human beings. Mm-hmm. Nobody should try to paint, even the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, in this whitewashed paint where they weren't people who were dealing with real problems, and Islam was helping them to grow out of those problems and become better people. You just don't we shouldn't whitewash them. It's like, Islam touched them and boom, they were instantly, perfect. They were saints, because that's not the reality. And teaching in that manner, it doesn't help people who are coming to Islam. It doesn't help their self-actualization. You know what I'm saying? Because you're not going to take your shahada and come into Islam and then you instantly, everything that, is less than stellar in yourself, it's not going to improve overnight. You know what I'm saying? So to teach that way, it's not truthful. Mm-hmm. At best it reeks of, I don't want to say, like, it's just not a truthful way.
Mm-hmm. I feel you. It doesn't seem to be a sincere or thorough way. It's definitely not a holistic way or a balanced way of looking at things.
It's not. And I'll give them. I want to give them this. Arabia, just like Africa, was not a monolith. Mm-hmm. It's reported that some of the companions among the Muhajirun means those who immigrated, meaning at one point in the Prophet's career, preaching to the Quraysh and preaching Islam, and they suffered much. And Allah finally gave them the permission to immigrate. And they decided to immigrate to Medina, where they would have, support for Islam, for the religion to grow and get strong. So those who immigrated and could immigrate, they immigrated from Mecca to Medina. One of them made a note. They said, man, things are much different in Medina than in Mecca. Mm. It's like a woman can say anything to her husband and look him dead in his eye. These women, they got a whole lot to say, right? Because a lot of those immigrants, they had to leave behind everything, their wealth, their homes. And some of them, their spouses didn't accept Islam. Their spouses sided with the Quraysh and they fought against Islam. So they had to leave the spouse too. They left the spouse too. And so when they came to Medina, the Prophet ﷺ, the way he paired up the brothers together, some people got married as well. And they found out real fast that the culture, even among the Arabs, was different from region to region. And the Medina was a place where the women, they had a say. They would stand up and say what they wanted to say and be like, hey, we're not taking this, we're not laying down for this, da-da-da. It was in that place where the women would be like, yo, the brothers, they taking all your time, oh Prophet. Make a time for us when we can come and sit in your presence right? Without being pushed and marginalized off to the side by all these dudes, well, we can ask our questions and we can learn from you and get guidance. And he would do that. But it was there that they did that because they was a different type of woman. So because they were different type of women, their society looked at them different as well. They didn't have the same problems that they did in Mecca. So even Arabia is not a monolith itself.
Right.
We know that other cultures outside of Arabia and outside of Africa, they got some different type of ways that they've been looking at women. To wit, to this day, without naming them, they have some very, very ugly practices. One of them, honor killings, quote unquote. We got an instance of that happened right here in Atlanta. And I don't want to go into it because it was ugly, in the Muslim community. This man killed his daughter, quote unquote, as an honor killing. Everybody know about it. And he was prosecuted and he got locked up. I'm not sure if they sent him back to his country or they locked him up here. But this, and again, this is why our elder Dr. Clark was mentioning it, because he wanted to illustrate and the what's behind different way that the culture or their societies is linked to the culture look at or regard women. And in Africa, we didn't have those issues and those problems. And in Africa, the women, even before Islam, they always had their own society and they were very empowered. They didn't have the issues of European women where they weren't allowed to own anything, or if their spouse died, they would be inherited by force by somebody in the family and their wealth taken from them. These weren't issues in at least West Africa. If you study even beyond West Africa and you go back into the Bantu culture and history and you study, you will find that the women in Africa, they've always been empowered and their rights have always been protected. So that history and that history informs the way and culture looks at women in general. And as human beings, it's very, very hard to not carry that culture into the religion and the spirituality. So this is why you get very, very different cultural aspects when it comes to just one topic, just women in Islam.
Yeah, no, real talk. I mean, as you were talking, I'm just spanning through our story, especially with this whole, how we started with the perception in many revolutionary circles that anything, we even got into how stuff originated in Africa, but anything that's perceived to be outside of Africa, originating outside of Africa, is something that there could be no good in ultimately for African people. You know, you think about people like Malcolm X, or Haj Malik Shabazz. You think about Imam Boukman, who helped to set off Boyké Man, the Haitian Revolution. You think of Martin Luther King. You think of Denmark Vesey and Nat Turner. And it's a wonder that they were reading these same books and following some of the same teachings that other people, as you said, other stuff was injected into it that would say, well, you know, servants obey your masters, and that is now interpreted as a justification for slavery and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? But what they got from it was liberation. Where they got from it is a whole different thing.
A whole different thing.
That kind of speaks to that in terms of what you were sharing about culture, how one's culture really does determine what you get out of life. Ultimately, that's my word. That's my interpretation of what you were sharing. You know, it really does determine to a large extent, because we could all be in one place, and because you grew up with some kind of taboo or some kind of fear of water, like there was some water monster that's going to come and swallow you up. We sitting here at one of those springs that you and I have visited, you know, with waterfalls over the years. I'm just in bliss. I'm getting the benefit of all the gold that's in them North Georgia mountains and all that kind of stuff. And you just in there shook, like, the water goblin gonna come get me any minute now. So you're living in terror, you know. We're speaking with our brother Imam Ihsan Muhammad, the culture you live in, the culture you love in, Indigenous Dreams. And we are so grateful to be able to share this time with you, brother. There's so much more we want to get into. So let's dig a little deeper into your story. And I think you've done, not even I think, and I know that you've done a very clear, a beautiful job of illustrating, even from the perspective of let's clear the lens a little bit so we can give this conversation a fair chance, right? And I must admit, for me, I often approach things that way. Just as a classroom teacher, I'm kind of trained to design my lesson for the knuckleheads in my, of which I was one. You know, I gotta say that too.
We need the most instruction. So if you pick on us, you pick us out, everybody else is gonna benefit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So the most difficult, you know, the hardest to reach. If there's somebody that's a so-called reluctant reader, then that's who I'm gonna think about. I'm not thinking about the person who is an avid reader. They just need the assignment, right? And what pages and what the follow through assignment is. So here we are. So I just wanted to more touch on some of those beautiful aspects. Speaking of the culture you love in, you know? Speaking of the culture you love in, that title was borrowed from a film I saw. I think I may have shared that with you over the years, called The Language You Dream In, which was exploration of the connection between the Mende people of Sierra Leone and the Gullah Geechee people of the Carolinas and Georgia coast. You know, long story short, I don't want to spoil it because it's something that definitely I would recommend for people to go check out. But there was a delegation, I think, that came over to somewhere on the Sea Islands, and they heard someone singing a song. These are people who ain't been to Africa for 300 years, separated even from the mainland U.S., which may be a clue to why they retained a lot of that stuff, you know?
Big time.
You know, we know talking about Sapelo and, you know, all those places. There's deep history there. So, long story short, they heard a song and it just started a conversation, and before you know it, some people they were having an exchange, and they found the tribe, the nation that they came from after being separated. And there were so many cultural retentions that they were able to trace. But it started with a song, you know. It started with a song. So anyway, what that says to me is, you know, there may be many different languages we speak. You know, we can all code switch and all this kind of stuff. But what is the language? What is the culture that we love in? When I say love, I don't mean like make love to your spouse and all that. I'm talking about, you know, of course that too. I'm talking about, you know, like what you dream in. Like when you get angry or very happy, you hear somebody break into their native accent, right? So there's a culture there as well that informs those things, that language. And that's what I'm really interested in hearing from Imam Ihsan. I know you as somebody who, as you've shared earlier, who spent a lot of time on the continent. I remember being at the Janaza, the funeral rites of your father. May our Creator be pleased with him. And later on, hearing about his link at Tuskegee and you know, even with Guyana and all this kind of stuff. And as you were saying earlier, just how this Western world separates the church and state. For me, I don't separate none of that in terms of the holistic nature of a person's life, you know, because they all contribute.
Well, just like medicine, when you separate out, you know, the certain elements of a herb that's known to cure a disease, they take it into the lab and they isolate what they think is the active ingredient, but then they discarded all the other elements that go along with that cure. Then you don't get what you're supposed to get. Yeah. You only getting a piece of it, you know. So we, as human beings, as holistic beings, you know what I'm saying, we need something that's holistic to us. We don't need to isolate out the things and separate them because we need all of that. We're not made up of just bodies. And it's when people forget that. A human being in the esoteric sciences of Islam is made up of a body, the nafs, or what we call the ego. They're made up of the mind. They're made up of the heart. And they're not talking about necessarily the heart that's beating in your chest. That's including the body. They're talking about something that's intangible when they say heart. And the person is made up of a spirit. And the person is made up of a secret. And each one of them has to be nourished in a certain way. And if the person doesn't have something, a way of life that it nourishes all of that, then the person is going to be deficient. We're already going to be deficient because we're not created perfect. But we can't achieve close to perfection when we're not nourishing all of our different parts. But and that was just a sidebar. To really talk about culture, I have to go into my own opinion. And as opinions go, as they say, opinion is like everybody got one. I'll start with like an ayah. Allah, he said in the Quran, وَلِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ جَعَلْنَا مَنْسَكًا هُمْ نَاسِكُوهُ فَلَا يُنَازِعُونَكَ فِي الْأَمْرِ. He said, for every peoples, right? Peoples include nations, tribes, every group of peoples. جَعَلْنَا مَنْسَكًا هُمْ نَاسِكُوهُ. We've made, rites and rituals and the thing that we could look at and call culture. For each one of them that they, observe, basically. And he said, فَلَا يُنَازِعُونَكَ فِي الْأَمْرِ. But they shouldn't go beyond the bounds in the matter. They shouldn't go in the extremes in terms of culture and things like that. So this is the creator of everything saying this, letting us know that he's the one who is behind making the rights and the cultures and things for people, for each people, right? And then he warns us, don't go beyond the bounds and that stuff, right? Elsewhere, Allah, he said, O people, إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن ذَكَرٍ وَأُنثَىٰ وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. O human beings, we've created you all, men and women, male and female, and we made you many, many tribes and different nations. Li esh ta'arafu. For what purpose did we cause this differentiation among you? Li ta'arafu, so that you would know one another. You relate to one another, not for any other purpose. So the different cultures are a part of that. I go from here to somewhere else, I'm going to encounter a whole different way of living, a whole different culture, different language, different food, different everything, right? Part of the peculiar experience, that being, our having been kidnapped and taken and brought here to this country, is that, as we mentioned earlier, part of them making it so the person will remain a slave was to make sure that we were divested, and that's I'm just trying to be nice. We were completely divested of our culture, our language, our rights and customs and our rituals, right? Because that's a part of making a person a slave. To wit, at one point, we can say maybe, when the majority of us attained to freedom from slavery, what we call culture, we had none. There were remnants, but we didn't have a complete culture. We didn't have our language. We didn't have our names. We lost our family and our tribal connections. We didn't know our food, the food that we used to eat. We didn't know the dress that we used to dress. We didn't know what customs that we used to do when we got married. What customs that we used to do when we celebrating the birth of a new life, a child. All of these things we were divested from. or they were taken from us very intentionally. So in a way, we didn't have a complete culture. And again, to it, Africa is not a monolith. We were taken from many, many different places. You mentioned the Mende people. They're the Olive people. They're some of the Tweed, the Fanti. These people, their people were stolen and taken into slavery. So even when we were brought here to America, we were no monolith of people. The cultures that were being stolen and beaten out of us were different cultures, different languages, different foods, different cuisines, different rituals, and ways that we honor and celebrate the gifts that God was giving us in terms of life and continuity and all those things, and our crops and all of that involves culture. We wipe clean of that. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. One of the companions of the Prophet, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, his name was Salman al-Farisi. And this is really inconsequential to what I'm saying, but he happened to be one of the Black companions. He was a Black Persian who his story is very unique in that he traveled throughout different places in active search for this path that would connect him back to God, because he realized that he had gotten disconnected from it, being in the culture of the superpower at the time, which was Persia. So he left that place, and along his journey, he even got enslaved at one point. But he didn't start that journey as a slave. He was a free person. What he said when he finally, met the Prophet ﷺ and embraced him, he heard the message and embraced Islam. He has a statement where, and I'm paraphrasing it because I don't know the hadith word by word, but he said, basically, through his journey, he's disconnected from his culture. He said, I don't have any culture except Islam. Islam is my father. For many of us, Pan-Africanism, and I'm talking about, that Pan-Africanism of my father, of Baba Ahmed, of those people in their generation. It was an attempt, because the Pan, this term Pan of Latin, it means you connect to
the cross.
You connect to the source. You're connected together over something. You're connected together over something that is common.
Yeah, across any kind of so-called borders and barriers.
Exactly. So it was this Africanness.
It's kind of like the I'm always reminded of this speech Kwame Ture was, where he pointed out, like Muhammad Speaks, the old paper.
The handshake from
hand
Africa
across the ocean.
And this was the philosophy behind it. So again, to your point, if somebody joined recently and they didn't hear it, is that these people invariably, they start to look at Islam as a means of freedom. And that's what it was originally. Completely untainted by any culture. It was a means of freedom. And that's how they saw it as well. So when they came into Islam, they were trying at the same time, through this study of Pan-Africanism, to tap back into what they lost, because they realized that what they had, it wasn't a complete culture. We had music aplenty, jazz, this, that, everything. We to the point where it's just a gift of a creator, where that part, it just resided somewhere in a subconscious, that when we were free to express that, the whole world. It moved the whole world. Whether you went to Germany, where, you know, at the same time as they would call you a nigga, you know, they were like, come over here, play some horn for us right quick. And they'd get up and start moving around and dancing, you know, the spirit, you know, because we still talking to the spirit.
Mm-hmm.
That part of our culture, it make the whole world is still following our trends when it comes to that part of our culture. Mm-hmm. You know, food, maybe, but in terms of like our language and all those other things, we didn't have that. So those elders that were embracing Pan-Africanism, they were looking to connect to that, but at the same time, they were fully aware of, hey, I'm a human being. I can't separate my church and my state. I need an Islam, or I need not Islam, I need a path that is gonna bring back those strands into one for me. I'm not trying to go to this market and buy this vegetable, and I gotta go over here and buy the seasons. I want one place one thing is gonna give me everything. And that's what they were looking for. And that's why a lot of them, they gyrated towards, or they started to lean towards Islam. The more they studied it, the more they loved it. Until they became to embrace it. When they embraced it, that didn't, you know, disabuse them of their intellect, right, and being able to see reality. To it, this is why, you know, we were talking about this, you know, recently. My father, in some of his writings that I found, you know, after his passing, he noted that in his writings. He said, you know, one of them, if I can remember, he said, we here now praying, right? But the brother I'm standing next to, I know by his energy, he can't wait to salam out of the prayer so he can engage in his white flight back to his neighborhood or his suburb where he is comfortable living, you know, with white people. Until he got to come back here again and stand next to me in prayer. I know he can't wait to get out of here. This is the energy, right? So he would note these. You see these things in his writings, but it didn't sour him on Islam, because at that point he had already learned that the culture is one thing and Islam is another.
Yeah, and I really appreciate. I mean, that was a very thorough intro to where we're going, you know, and I appreciate your focus on the word culture and the distinction. And so I want to make a clarification just for the sake of making my question clear and even the whole theme. I'm using the word culture and way of life interchangeably, you know, in that sense. So not just because that's very important. What you just did is helped us to distinguish how the religion is separate from the cultures of the world. How it sometimes would substantiate cultures of the world or even clarify cultures, right? All of that. So even within that, the culture of the religion, as you have experienced it, you know, to the point where now it's second nature, you know, that's really where I'm really interested in going. Whatever word we want to use, whether it's culture or anything else, the deen, the way of life, that is, you know, as we say, as Rastafari said, the liberty. In terms of those sciences, those ways and more ways, those formulas, which are fundamental to its being, which also what my interest is in terms of spirituality in general and religions of the world in general is there's an essence, there's a golden thread that is congruent to our humanity, you know? It's not like something new kind of science you got to learn over here. I talk a lot about that a lot with agriculture. I don't see agriculture as a religion, but it's something you do religiously, you know what I mean? It's a fundamental part of human culture, right? as our elders, Baba Tariq, and them said, there's no culture without agriculture. Actually, you know what I mean. We ain't gonna go in that rabbit hole. That's a whole different thing there.
There's no species without agriculture.
There's nothing. So I'm just saying though. So there's these fundamental tenets. I'm reminded of Baba Metahochi, a great priest, African priest, who is credited with being one of the people who reintroduced African people in this society to traditional African spirituality, you know. And one of the things he said is that if a true Muslim, a true Christian, and a true African spiritualist were all in the same room, you shouldn't be able to tell the difference. To me, that don't mean they ain't dressed different or something, you know what I mean? Why is it? What does that really mean though? You know, if they shouldn't be able, so that's the premise that I'm working with. You know, you shouldn't be able to tell the difference because there gotta be something fundamental. So, and that's the key word, fundamental, you know, that's integral to any of those paths.
The fundamental thread that run through all those is not only the belief, but the active acquiescence, the recognition, and connection to the unity. What I mean by unity is the unity of existence, and that there is only one deity. There's only one God. So when he's saying he's the one who put the qualifiers there: a true Muslim, a true Christian, and a true practicer of African traditionalism. The thread that runs through all of their belief, that connect them together, is the belief in one God and that unity. If you study back, and I wouldn't call myself a student of Bantu culture, but I've had the blessing to read into it a lot. You can see that one of the, you mentioned earlier about that generational curse, like, you know, bad times create strong people create, and so on. And so, and I reference, like, an Islamic, you know, concept of that is that every 3, you know, generations in any culture or peoples, right, the culture will suffer some type of decrease, right? And if God intends for those people to continue on, then, you know, that cycle will continue. If God intends for a people to disappear, then the cycle won't continue, and they'll die out or get absorbed, you know, some other way. And I lost for a second there.
Over here. So, we're live with Imam Hassan Muhammad, and we're sharing about the indigenous dreams, the culture we live in. There's a lot going on in the background. Like I said, we're at the farm and really enjoying ourselves.
My mind got distracted where I was trying to go with that, but it also I may have been about to say something that might not have been appropriate. So I don't take those brain quote unquote farts. It's just that sometimes I'm being silenced.
Right.
You know what I mean? But so going back to the thread, the common thread, what I was mentioning was that in that study of the Bantu people, they would say, like, after a certain amount of generations, that even their belief system would be corrupted, either by exposure to other tribes and other beliefs, or more so when the people of that culture lose touch with the tradition being passed down, then their belief get corrupted. And we know the source of that because, on the spiritual side, we know the source of that because we have also a common enemy that also binds us. Not only the belief in God and the unity of God, there's also this common enemy of humanity that is always seeking to take humanity off the path of being connected to God and obedience towards the Creator and, service, to our fellow human being, which is another thing that connect us all together.
Yeah,
all
it's real.
The past, they rest on this concern for our fellow being, serving them and helping them. So not only the belief in one God go together with this tenet of, helping and serving, our fellow creature, not only human being, but the rest of creation as well. But one of the things that they taught was that if the culture or the society didn't create a secret society among that society that was tasked with raising up, they would pick a child born based on, the looking at the sky and looking at the knowledge of astrology and astronomy, what was going on at the time, and they would use that to pick the best child, and that child would be basically consecrated and committed to being taught all of the secrets of the tribe, their history, the spiritual path, all of that. If that didn't continue, then they said part of that generation, that 3-generation decline would be that would be lost to that tribe. And when it's lost, then their spiritual path would be corrupted, and then you will find people falling into, practices like idolatry.
You'll see more. Yeah, you'll see more and more need for more laws. We always are reminded that the law is for the lawless. I was always taught that first the law was in the heart, and it wasn't written down or any of this kind of stuff. But the more we stray away from our source, then there's a need for reminders. There's a need for prophecy. There's a need for, proverbs and pataki and this and that would remind us of what balanced character looks like. You said it. You ain't got to remind a fish of the importance of water unless they get estranged from their natural space.
Yeah, exactly. If they start doing something unfishy, walking around and doing stuff on land, then But this is if we look at that, the history of revelation throughout the years, we see that pattern too. That the Creator won't send another prophet or another messenger until the people have strayed far from the previous message. And when you see the situation dire, then he's sending another message that's particular to this time, another prophet who speaks the language of these people to teach them and guide them and bring them back to him, right? To remind them of their humanity, to remind them of his oneness, to remind them of their obligation to serve each other and to help each other and to help the creation, and over time, like you said, though, that generational thing happens where the society goes into decline. They also go into spiritual decline. We're not just talking about physical decline. We're not talking about, famine and drought. And no, we're talking about spiritual decline. When they go into spiritual decline, you hear like God, he sent another message, another revelation to bring them back until he finally, sent the last revelation, the last messenger. But going back to that point, this is what linked them all together. And this is why Islam spread in Africa. One of the things, Sheikh Hassan who, was our teacher and our guide and our host, our everything there in Senegal. one of the things he used to teach us, and he was a real student, a real scholar of history and of everything else. He will remind us, he said, look at the history, even of the enemies of Islam, and you will find that Islam did not spread by the sword in Africa. This is something that the European scholars that they've tried to bleat out like sheep. And they keep on saying it and hoping that somebody's going to believe it. But he said, if you study history, even among their real scholars, you will see that Islam did not spread in Africa by the sword. One of the reports from the early African Muslims that were recorded by the Europeans, they asked them, they said, and I'm not remembering the name of the book, but it was a book that, we studied in college when I took non-Western history. He said, we became aware of this new religion, Islam, from the merchants who used to travel here and, trade with us and, in gold and slaves and so on and so forth. And then we would see them step to the side and wash themselves and, go in these motions. So we would ask them, what are you doing? Oh, I'm praying. Praying to what? Praying to God. Who's your God? The one God. And you say, okay, we have a name for God, that one God too. And they would, this is the name of God in our language. In all of the African language, they had many names and epithets for God. So they would say, yeah, we believe that. What does your religion say about this? About that? Oh, we believe that too. Our society is against adultery. Our society is against theft. Our society, we encourage people to help those who are less fortunate. We believe all that already. Then they would say, what reward were you promised? And they would describe paradise. And they said, oh, this sounds like a good deal. I like this. And they would take Islam of their own accord, just like that. And it was spread on every level. When the chiefs heard about it, when they accepted Islam, they would tell their people about it, and you would see a whole tribe accept Islam at once. It wasn't by the sword, not in Africa. And what people forget, people say, oh, this is an Arab religion. Africa was the first to support Islam. This is why it's a funny thing. If you go to Saudi Arabia, right, and not to be negative, but, you might see somebody get mistreated because of where they're from on the street. The street everywhere is a street everywhere. You know what I mean? We talking about the street. So it ain't nothing special. But even on the street people, if they see somebody and they go to mistreat them and they say the person jump back and be like, man, I'm from Ethiopia. They'd be like, okay. You know why? Because when Islam was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ and he was preaching to the Quraysh, he went to different powerful tribes at the time to try to make alliances to spread the message of Islam so that Islam could gain strength. And for the most part, they all rejected him in the beginning. And when his companions, when they reached their limit and they said, man, this oppression is too much. My tribe is weak. They can't protect me. When I go out on the street, the Quraysh, they abuse me. They abuse my women, my children. I can't take it no more. Prophet, let us leave this place. So he said, immigrate to Abyssinia, which is, that was the name of the where modern day Ethiopia is. Mm-hmm. Immigrate to Abyssinia, for there you will find a king, a Christian king, who rules justly and would treat you kindly and protect you and allow you to practice your religion. And when they immigrated, they found the matter just to be like that. Not only did he protect them, he gave them land, helped them set up, he allowed them to practice Islam And they didn't even have to hide themselves. They were allowed to even preach Islam to the people. And he protected them against the Quraysh when they came to try to take them back. So this is why we say Islam is an African religion, because it was first protected and inculcated and allowed to grow and given a space to flourish in Africa and by Africa. So again, the spread of Islam in Africa was not by the sword. Anybody who want to take up the study of history in earnest, they're going to find that for themselves. So again, to debunk, this idea that people like to espouse that, Islam is a slavery religion, is far from it, because Islam is freedom. Another aspect I wanted to touch on was that this slavery that Islam found, it was the first thing to ever come and put some kind of alleviation to that situation. See, the reason they may say, a person may say, oh, but Islam didn't outlaw slavery. Okay, we agree with you, it didn't. Because slavery was an ingrained part of every society and every culture of the world. Again, original slavery was a product of military aggression. It didn't have anything to do with a person's color, religion, tribe, nationality, race at all.
So, but is there a distinction in your mind? I mean, you said it earlier, but just for people joining us, a distinction between the chattel slavery, which you said earlier, if our ancestors were even able to continue to practice what they were practicing, the reason why some of the Orientalists and all this would be so keen on diverting our attention from such a tool is that we wouldn't last long. We wouldn't be on the plantation so long. So just for the sake of this English language, you mentioned in slavery, the first thing that comes to many of our minds is chattel slavery, the ma'afa. And so I just want to make sure you're saying you're talking with a wide brush, or are you talking about a specific type of system which was in place?
We definitely talk about a different type of slavery. Again, and for the people who are joining, we are making a differentiation between the slavery that was instituted, not only physically, materially, geographically, but philosophically by the Europeans, is a completely different animal. Maybe we should say European slavery. I don't know. I mean, but because it's definitely a completely different thing. I mean,
or the Arab slavery, because it's known that in some places that was some of the most brutal one. We're not talking about what you're sharing in terms of what historically the Muslims came and met, or that kind of stuff. But we're talking about there were some Arabs in history that brutalized African people and took them into bondage just as much as Romans did.
These people, they brutalized everybody. Everybody. If you study, for example, the harems, right, of even some of the kingdoms that came into Islam, if you study the makeup of their harems, so to speak, you see people from everywhere. Slavs, again, Eastern Europeans. You see, people from the Caucasoid area, real Caucasoid mountains. Like the Georgian people. You see people from certain parts of India. You see people from certain parts of Africa. There were some straight up Europeans who got caught up and sold into slavery. Another one of the Sahabas, they forgot his name. It's not coming to me right now. He was a straight up Roman They had a nickname for him because he had blue eyes. He was there because he got sold into slavery. He wasn't there because he was coming looking for Islam. And he wasn't there for no other purpose because at that time Arabia was like the backyard of the world. He was there because he got enslaved, and most of the slaves would pass through Arabia and be sold in other places. It was a form of commodity for them at the time. Again, if the cultures and the peoples who acquired slaves through military aggression, even in Africa, they would trade slaves for gold and silver and with the Arabs, and the Arabs would carry away people.
Yeah, I mean, this is a as you just said, this is a theme that is very prevalent in today's society that can't be run away from, needs to be looked at square on and with factual, as you've been mentioning the whole time. Because even, let's just take Islam, Christianity, even any religious out of it for a minute. And when we think of one of the big narratives, another narrative that is hotly debated by Africans in America and Africans in on the continent, or Africans in diaspora, the whole generalization that Africans sold us, outside of any religious stuff, the Africans sold us. And so on one side of that debate, it said that, well, they didn't know what they were selling us to, because this was a part of thing. You just trade, that's part of what was a part of the fabric of that society in that time, was that people could get sold into slavery in a different way, and not the ma'afa and all that kind of stuff, but but what is used to even further justify that is that in that form of slavery, you could even marry. You can marry into the same family. You could eventually own property. Not just own property, but be a very high ranking member of the family that so-called you were a slave of, etc., etc., etc. So I'm just saying that's just an example that to even take the spice of religion off of it for a brief moment is something that is in our human consciousness that we're attempting to grapple with.
Yes.
You understand?
Yes. So a lot of things people don't like to. We have a problem with acquiescing to things, because when we have to acquiesce to something, we have to accept responsibility, and people are adverse to accepting responsibility. It's like, responsibility. What's that? Like, oh, get it off me. Nobody. It's not. It's not an easy thing to shoulder, right? Yeah. So of course, people don't like to delve into subjects where they have to accept and acquiesce to certain things where any type of responsibility will lay on them. So if they can get out of doing that, of course they're not going to talk about it. But yeah, we have to talk about it. There were two types of being sold off in Africa. One was if a person was a slave already, they can get sold and it was no big deal. Like you said, they didn't know what they didn't know the European. They didn't know what they were selling these people into, and if they did know, it wouldn't have mattered to them at the time. Then you have another form where when the Europeans, they realized that they had superior arms and they can make incursions into certain lands that were, their flanks were unprotected. They were unfortified, and they could make incursions and kidnap free people and enslave them. And they did that. They did that time and time and time again. There were tribes that attempted to stop them, and people lost their lives. There were another type of slave, a third type, where very smaller tribes that may have, for one reason or other, kind of become exiles, rogue tribes, you could say, who would make forays or attacks on outlying villages kidnap people and then take them to white people on the on the shores and on the port towns and sell them into slavery to get money and trinkets and so on and so forth. So there were different ways that a person could fall into slavery, into European slavery at that time. And again, we're making a distinction between the two because another facet of slavery, Arab slavery or slavery before this European slavery, a person could negotiate their freedom and say, look, you put me to such and such task. If I double and triple that task for the next 5 years, can I pay my freedom at this price? And he was like, shh. If you do that, she bring me such and such and such. Yeah, you can get your freedom. And many people have manumitted themselves like that. Sheikh Hassan pointed out, he said, if you look at history, the earliest scholars of Islam, the bulwarks of Islam, of Islamic scholarship, they were all slaves or the children of slaves. The majority of them. And I was like, huh? And like, yeah, the majority of them, they were either not Arabs themselves or they were former slaves that had either, their Muslim brothers got together and put together enough wealth to manumit them and secure their freedom, or they worked hard and secured their own freedom. As in the case with our predecessor Bilal alayhi salam, his love for Islam was so strong that the Prophet sallallahu told the companions get together and free your brother. And his captor or his I hate to use the word master or owner, but his captor said a ridiculous price. In the community, they banded together and put that price together and bought his freedom.
Indeed. And it's funny because with Bilal, as you mentioned him, in some circles, he's also known as, it's pointed out that maybe they feel the need to point it out because of the connotation of that word, slave. But he was not just a regular person, not just a person who was able to be the first muezzin, but was a lawyer, was a litigator, was a very skilled person in terms of even his, it's like you hear one aspect of somebody's life,
and that's it,
as you mentioned, but you don't hear the other aspect. But some of the other things are so crucial and would even give you such more understanding of like who this person is. You know what I mean?
You touch on something.
So when you just mentioned, it's a slave, he was a former slave. So there's this for former slaves or people who are former or not slaves in terms of the ma'afa, like ourselves, I would say more properly, descendants or ascendants of enslaved Africans, captured Africans, that ring, that has a certain ring to it, like you can identify, like he wrote, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
But there's just so much more to so many of our people, the predecessors, our ancestors, from a historical standpoint, that my point is that if we even knew we've even had a deeper understanding of who they are, who they were, it would only enrich our experience and the inspiration that we get to continue in that way.
There's a reason why the senior Sahabas used to call Bilal Sayyiduna, or our master. And one of the sheikhs, I asked him a question one day about Sayyidina Bilal, or our master Bilal, and I asked him a question about his utterance, Ahad, when he was being tortured, which was one. They would say, denounce this Islam and embrace our idols again. And he would just keep repeating, one, Ahad. And he looked at me and he was like, yo, you asked a question, I can't even, if I go into it, we're going to be here all night. I was asking him the question at the end of our sitting. He was like, yo, we open that door, is no stopping. he said, I had started to write a book about Bilal, to illustrate, just to really go into his life, because nobody really done that yet. And I was like, do it. I was like, yo, if you do it now, I'm helping you. I'm at your feet. I'm transcribing. Whatever whatever you need me to do, I'm for it. I'm telling you, I'll go into hibernation. And he was like, inshallah, I've been wanting to do it, but I'm busy. So when you say that, you reminded me, I'm gonna follow up with him because I really want him to put it out, man. He's a scholar of very high caliber, and he's one of those people. We would call him young because he's in his 30s. But when you sit and talk with him, you realize that Allah, he already gave him something special already. And the reason why you haven't heard of him, because of his adab and his etiquette and his manners, that he stayed real hid, real humble, because he realized, he not trying to be put out like that, right, when his elders are still around. So that's kind of his vibe. But right. I told him, I said, this is the time for that book. This is the time for that book. If this time passed, that book not going to be needed. I said, this is the time when people need that book. Like you said, there's so many facets to him as a person that nobody know about, because they always talk about, oh, he was the prophet's muezzin, or the caller to prayer. Just like our elder, Dr. Clark. Dr. Clark was talking about. He was like, talking about the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He was looking for somebody. Beyond looking for somebody to call to prayer, it started with looking for a way to call the believers to prayer. And that's a whole nother story in itself. And when he finally settled on, having someone call, and he heard Bilal's voice, and he's like, oh, forget about it. But that's what they talk about. Right, and they don't talk about much else. They talk about, how he was tortured, but they don't know how deep his story goes. And if they knew, it would just be one of those, just another thing that would help our people along in their development, in their path, because our situation and our path is so similar. We identify with him.
Exactly. It's something you can resonate with. And
resonate, that's the word I was looking for.
I mean, it's funny because Dr. Clark is the one who I heard that from first, and I went in deeper. He was like, people, they just talk about Bilal being one, or a former slave. Bilal was a such and such and such, I think an Ethiopian himself. So the information is out there. I'm thinking now that we've been in here for almost 2.5 hours, and we're literally in one of them beautiful swimming holes that you never want to get out of. And so I want to, as we wrap up this segment, because we have to continue this, at some point, you know what I'm saying? We have to. It's necessary, just like breathing fresh air and laughing, all them kind of things, to continue to reason about who we are, our makeups. I want to end even with that, on that, and that note, or seal for now on that note. You mentioned earlier about, if I'm remembering correctly, in the Islamic sciences, that a being is made up of these different facets. And if you could just kind of touch on that for a minute, as a matter of summary, in terms of giving us a little bit of homework, a little bit to reflect on, even as a further means of introducing this essence that you, Imam Hassan, and so many millions of people around the world love in. There's a fundamental philosophical framework there that feeds that essence. So share with us just a little summary of those things again, if you can remind us.
Alhamdulillah, for sure. And for sure, Islam, a comprehensive Islam, a holistic Islam, is definitely, the mode or the path that I love in. And, as we mentioned, in Islam looks at the human being on all of its levels. And it addresses the human being on all of its levels. And this is why it's a complete path for the human being. As we mentioned, the way Islam look at the human being, and this is something that, we learn from the motherland. I didn't read, before I read this in a book, I got this from sitting at the feet of one of our local scholars from, the Gambia. He's since left America a long time ago. He's in the UK now, and the people that benefit from him greatly. His name was Sheikh Baicham. I remember sitting with him, and he said, and later on he wrote a very small pamphlet about this, about the human or man. He entitled it "Man," right? And he said the human being that you're looking at is made up of different aspects, and each one of them basically needs its own nourishment for the person to be considered alive. Because we see many people here walking around, they're not even alive. They're like zombies. You see them moving, you see them eating and talking, but they're not even really here. They're not alive yet. They haven't come alive to their complete humanity, so to speak. So he used to say, of course, the human is made up of a body in all its parts, all 360 bones, and all the internal organs, including the brain, the heart that beating, that holds that charge, that keeps everything going. That's the body of the human being. Everybody know that this body, it has things that it needs. Without it, the body will cease to exist. The body needs food, it needs drink, it needs sleep, right? Among other things. He said the human being is also made up of the nafs, or its self, or its ego. There's, some of those terms beg more definition, but I know we got to wrap it up, so I'll just keep it brief. The nafs, what it needs is to be put in check. The self or the ego, it has to be put in check. It has to be trained and restrained in order for it to grow. That's what it needs. It needs to be put in check. That's the food that it needs. The human being is also made up of the mind. And we're not talking about the brain, because the brain is part of the body. The mind is there and it's kind of intangible. It's connected to us, but it's an intangible part of us. And what the mind needs is knowledge. It needs to be fed on knowledge for it to grow and sustain itself. It can't be stifled. It can't be allowed to just be fed with foolishness, entertainment. But the mind also, every now and then, it needs to be entertained. Because the mind can't survive just on study all the time. It needs a break. It needs to be entertained. It needs to, have some enjoyment, some pleasure, all of that. The mind like to see something that is beauty. The mind like to hear something that is beautiful, sounds. So the mind need all of that to flourish. The human being has a heart. And again, we're not talking about the physical heart that's pumping. We're talking about the heart that is intangible, connected to the person, but it can't be touched by the hand. The heart, it need interconnectedness with human people. It need for you to, serve people, be around people, to help people. It need a bunch of other things as well. The heart needs remembrance of its creator to flourish. The heart needs many other things as well. If it don't get those things, it's like the heart of a person is dead. Mm-hmm. The person is also made up of a spirit. Again, spirit intangible, but connected to the person. Mm-hmm. We can almost say the spirit is the person in reality. Mm-hmm. And the body is just the steed or the animal that it rides in this life. Mm-hmm. The spirit, what it have and what it needs is to be, on the path that connected, or keep it connected to its source. They keep it connected to the unity of everything, which is what we say, God. If it get cut off from that, the spirit, it wallow and it can get corrupted. And the spirit needs more things as well. And lastly, he said the spirit, the human being is made up of a sir. A sir, it means the secret. And when it came to that, I didn't understand. So I said, what is this? What is the secret? What is a human being's secret? He said, it's a direct connection with the creator, with the source. And nobody knows it except for the creator and that person. If it's not there, then that person is disconnected, and we already know what happened to them when you get disconnected here on this side of living. So all of these aspects of a person, a human being, they need to nourish. They need to grow along with the person. And if they're not nourished, then the person is not in touch with their humanity. It shouldn't be called a human being. And that's how the spirituality of Islam look at the person. So the person have a need for something that address all of these things. It feeds all of these things, guides all of these different facets of a human being in order for us to really be human. That's how we look at it.
Beautiful, beautiful. That's our brother Imam Ihsan. And as you said, we've said so many times during this conversation, so much of what has been shared today is a self-existing world in itself. I mean, we could go down so many different, streams and up so many different branches of this beautiful tree. We're really grateful for you taking the time during this sacred month to be with us.
Alhamdulillah.
And to share some thoughts, you know what I'm saying?
It's our pleasure. I can't see. My internal energy would probably be different if I was there in person and I saw the computer up and all of that, because I'm forgetting that we live on the show. I feel like we just kicking it. So you probably wouldn't have got that out of me if I was there.
It's all good. It's all good. I know how to get what I need. You know what I mean? That's one of the gifts that our Creator has given me. I'm grateful, man. And really, it's nothing supernatural, because all it is just being able to connect to the heart. I feel that storytelling is going to bring us home, So if we are able to invoke the stories in each other, you know what I'm saying? As sisters and brothers in this world, that's going to be that will continue to be, and increasingly so transformative and so empowering, you know what I'm saying? Because all of the answers are already there. It's like nothing new under the sun. So what does that mean practically, That means it's just a thing of remembrance, bringing the body back together that's been scattered. So this is our goal. This is our mission. This is our joy as well. So I'm grateful, brother. I'm grateful. And it's definitely an open invitation, because I know you got me on the edge of my seat, literally. And it's just, I got some people waiting for me in the garden, full disclosure. So I gotta run.
And something you said, I'm gonna leave you with this. Something you just said. You said, "I get what I need." Mm-hmm. I was like, that sounds like it's almost poetic. The movie you said is, "I bring what I love."
Yes,
I get what I need. I'm hearing a project, and that's the title of it. I get what I need.
Say less. Say less. Say less. Say less. Say less. Imam Ihsan Muhammad, much love to you, beloved, and the family. Mm-hmm. Thank you for joining us. We're looking forward to touching base again.
Inshallah, always. I'm off camera.
Yes, sir. No, on camera too. No. Let's be clear. So that's why I told y'all he got jokes too. A wise man is very quick and sharp. Don't be trying to, Imam is saying he gotta come from, I don't know what neighborhood he born in, but he come from that proverbial hood all over the world that exists all over the world where you're not gonna get over on our brother and bring no quick talk. You know what I mean? So just to be clear, publicly as well as off camera, let's link soon.
Mashallah. Let's not hold you from the people that waiting. I'm sure they've been waiting a long time.
All right, much love, brother.
Much love, man. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
That's our brother Imam Ihsan. Thank you for joining us today. Family, stay tuned to yourself at all times. Stay tuned to yourself at all times. We want to play some more of this Dr. John Henry Clarke for you, and we'll seal up with this to give him the last word. I'll say the final word for now, as a warrior scholar. He shared a lot with us. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this right now, and then we're going to come forward because I do have to get out in the garden. This is real life and real life, and we're there all the while. So check this out. I bring what I love.
Man Youssou Ndour maa ngi woo bépp doomu Afrika ñu bokk xalaat bokk gis-gis bokk yéene sans frontière boole sunu am te liggéey waratuñu nangu kenn ñëw di ñu féewale bul jiite réew foog ne la fa nekk yow yaa ko moom njiit bu dëgër dana war a fekk nga bëgg sa réew te sàkku ndimbal nekk fekk loxol boroom we Africa bu jant bi fekkee waaw na la fekk jóg ak sa jumtukaay bëccëg bi gaaw na ñett du bëre te ñaara mën kenn waaw yoon wi sore na te metti na nañu ko waaja bodul na bi xalaat lañu defoon na Sokol dootul nekk dootoo xalaat lu dul fento suma sañoon Afrika benn nit moo koy jiite ñu boole sunuy xalaat ak sunuy doole jokko nañu bi frontière yu taxal yoon di ba ñëpp a gisee ci cootiki work together keep on walking Cheikh Anta Diop Kwame Nkrumah, Stephen Biko, all you people, Africa.
1998. Et le mois de Ramadan, le soir, il y a eu toujours des discussions sur l'islam. Nous avons eu une discussion à la radio. Le journaliste dit, pourquoi pendant le Ramadan, vous ne chantez pas? Oui, c'est vrai, nous ne chantons pas, mais pourquoi? Pourquoi vous ne chantez pas? Pourquoi vous... Ça veut dire que ce que vous faites est haram, n'est pas bon pour la religion. J'ai dit non, ce que nous faisons est bon pour la religion. Nous faisons de la musique, nous faisons... Mais il dit, pourquoi vous arrêtez au moment de Ramadan? C'était une grande question.
Let's go. Are you ready tonight? Everybody clap your hands. It's gonna be all right tonight. Long nights. You should know it's virtual. In the house. And people, you should know. Kubutu babi, jahle bajak, dafani ko bamba, mune ko mbake, mune ko yani won don pen saborom, che doton samarom, te waktu giliga, so jul waktu wi, dinga ton saborom, te boy gile sunu bir gal dinga ñu ton. Bamba Sani Dirbigi to Bapaya. You hear me, Father Bamba? She say, yeah, you Father Bamba. The man in me changes. Every time I read your Hasid, my strong faith in you makes me survive in this crazy world. Now I can go anywhere, cause I know you'll be there. We know your pain will always make us stronger, Mamba.
Salam alaikum. Ende fay. Sumana. Nada. Waaw. Ni doon wayal de. Te me lekk ak moom. Sumana ka. Waaw. Mu ngi gis.
Bisu war naa mën a way. Ndax man mii ko jur. Samay maam dañ daan way sama ndey di ànd ak buur yi di way kon Youssou su juddoo ci askanu Ngaw la war naa mën a way
Mami babe
Waaw. Waaw.
Un griot traditionnel, c'est quelqu'un qui a beaucoup d'informations sur les familles, sur l'histoire, sur les dates, la religion et sur les acteurs de la vie. Ils connaissent toutes les histoires. Ma mère est griotte, mais mon père n'est pas griot. C'était l'amour. Ils ont cassé tous les tabous. Ma mère était partie de sa maison pour rejoindre mon père. Ils ont créé un endroit neutre. J'y vivais, mais en même temps, l'environnement griotte de ma mère me manquait. Et c'est pour cela, à un moment, je suis retourné vivre chez ma grand-mère. Et comme j'ai grandi dans cette grande famille de ma grand-mère, j'étais baigné dans cette atmosphère griotte. waaw li ma ci jaaxaloon mooy sam papa ba nekkee xale dafa bëggoon musique waaye nag bi ma commencé musique dafa bañoon ma def musique su may kilifa dañu bëggoon comme ni ko kilifa yëpp di defee yóbbu seen doom école ma dugg école di jàng di continuer di jàng ba nga xam ne que affaire musique bi dugg na ma.
man ak Youssou ñi nga xamante bi ñu amee 14 ans et moi j'étais côté percu tu vois donc ñuy ànd di def loolu nekk ay xarit.
man mosuma ñëwee taxaw sama papa di ko wax damay way moom ngay fàq nañu def nañu lépp dem Gambie suba teel fi du njëkk fanaan benn boîte de nuit la plein air bu ñu tasee loge yi ñu defoon dañuy jekkalaatal ba njëkk ñu jël affaire yi sangu nelaw fa yeewu foofu lañ dëkkoon en même temps.
On n'avait pas d'argent, mais on jouait. Parfois on joue, parfois on ne joue pas. Mais nous, on s'en fout. Oui, on voulait juste faire de la musique et réussir.
Mais on était aux anges déjà. Bon, après, imaginez nga dem Gambie fekk instrument yi ñoom Pape Touré ñoom si yàlla si ñoom Moussa Ngom nekkoon ay woykat yoo xam ne dañ leen xamoon ñu ñëw vraiment am chance su xaw leen a jege di leen gis di jouer ñun tamit ñuy apprécier mais c'était non mais kooku non boo xooloon suñu bët dañu koy xulli.
Tu vois, son papa a envoyé des policiers, tu vois, pour qu'ils retournent sur Dakar. Donc policiers yi jël ko yóbbu ko Kaolack.
ñu bëgg a delluwaat Gambie aw ma possibilité si laa jël suma dàll ma jaay ko si marché bi je me rappelle même pas parce que en tout cas daal ki ko jënd moom ni dàll yi ma jël jox ma xaalis bi rek na mat lu ma mën a yóbbu ba ci bac bi bu ma demee ba ci bac bi ma yegg Banjul.
ci man ko Youssou man bëgguma ngay tukki looy def boo jàng wa jàng ko fi ci Dakar bi nga juddoo mun ma yaay man dama bëgg rek lu ma leen dimbalee dama bëgg sa xel dal ci man ni man du ma bon du ma naan du ma tox du ma ànd ak ku bon man ko ay da ngay doon xale ca xale mu naa man ko dafay toog ci ay waajuram di ko surveiller.
ñoo créé bu ñu décidé na ne lii moom du sotti kilifa la nañ dellu.
Musique latine moo amoon doole trop fii ñe dañ fi dindi loolu waaw dañ ko fi dindi pour imprégner suñu musique mbalax pure et dure affaire de commencer di rëy.
bu mu formé Super Étoile li mu njëkk a def lu muy matériel bi mu jënd kër ba mu koy jël daf ko jëndaaleel papaam oto te boobu amagul sax mu fay instrument yi mu jëlaale ko oto tegunu juróom benn weer Youssou fay instrument yi fay oto ba mu jëlaloon papaam.
du lépp luñ la wax wala lépp luñ la wax ci lu mel ni cinéma nga daal di koy gëm tilti loo du weesu teg
Griot in West Africa is the one that has to say the important things, that has to carry the message that needs to get out to people. It seems like you're doing that in just in a very different way.
We are modern griot.
Yusuf, you really have made social activism a part of your music from the beginning, right?
Yeah.
There was that Amnesty International Human Rights Now tour that you did with Peter Gabriel and Bruce Springsteen. That was many years ago.
Yes, many years ago.
I was just blown away by his voice and the power of his performance, and the music, which was quite foreign to me, but also fresh and exciting. And that made me determined to try and learn more, to meet him, and to see if there was something we could do
À la fin de cette rencontre, il y avait une conscience politique très, très, très forte et un choix de rester pour les peuples, c'est-à-dire les droits de l'homme, la justice, tu vois, l'émancipation de la femme, toutes les choses comme ça s'étaient retrouvées pour être le contenu politique de ce que nous faisons.
Et avec moi, là, c'est le disque, c'est le platine qui sanctionne la vente de plus d'1 million de copies de 7 Seconds en Europe.
He has the capacity to make it so. And this is what we need to look at. Not to ignore the Arab at all, not to ignore the fact that it was from Arabia that the religion came out, swept over into North Africa, and had its rapid growth. All right, now, after this religion barely got underway, the prophet had some difficulty, had to leave Medina, then literally had to fight his way back to Mecca. Bilal was with him all of the time, and so was Zayd bin Harith. Zayd bin Harith was the governor of the Prophet's tribe, the Quraysh, and he was married into the Prophet's family, one of the highest honors possible. And he is hailed as one of the great heroes of Islam in the Encyclopedia of Islam and other literatures of Islam. The literature of Islam writes about the great blacks, but they don't tell you they were black. And what we need to do is to do a little more research